are aesthetic considerations. So again, it's not just what you're taking a photograph of, but how you're making that image. You are making decisions every day, aesthetic decisions. And what is aesthetic? Here's, it's a philosophical study of beauty and taste, fine. But it's also what we like, what we don't like. It's how we determine, how to get dressed in the morning. What do we want to look like? What colors do we want? Are we happy? Are we sad? What do we want to convey to other people? All of these things are aesthetic choices. Choice of color, subject matter composition, how you edit it. You are working from an internal idea of what you like and what you don't like. That changes too. As you see other things, you start to incorporate them, you take them away. You know, we'll spend a lot of time talking about aesthetic choices, but just know that you are making them, okay? I'm asking you to sort of start paying attention to those things that you are doing. So if you want to go through this and look this over, I'm going to go through it again in our next class. Composition, we're going to talk about how the image is laid out. You are looking through a viewfinder. It is going to be a rectangular format. You can either use it long and shorter, rectangular, which is called a landscape mode, or you can flip it. It can be taller and not as wide, which is portrait mode. But you're working within that. You're going to use that little rectangle. It can either be like a canvas where everything is on it, or like a box where everything is enclosed in it, or more like a window where there's things like right now, as my hands go off, you follow this up and you assume that I have fingers, even though you can't see them. We can use it as sort of a window. There's other things going on, but this is the part that you're seeing. Again, we're going to talk more about these things as we go through. The rule of thirds, I'm going to spend a lot of time on this. But basically, let me tell you, for your first photographs, the most boring photographs you can make are things shot from standard human eye level with your subject placed in the center. So what I mean that is, if you were to draw a tic-tac-toe across the little rectangle that is your viewfinder, human eye level and whatever you're photographing right here in the center is going to make for what's called a static image. Your eye will go to that, and then it won't move around the photograph. Rule of thirds is a way of moving an area of interest out of the center and onto one of these sort of where these lines intersect. And what that does is it opens up negative space. It opens up another space here. So your eye goes to the focal point, and then in this case, it's actually using a leading line back here into these other people, into these other people. You follow his eyes back around and up and down. And the reason why is that if you can get a viewer to move their eye around your image, if they're engaged in the image, it's going to seem more interesting. Even if the subject matter is not that interesting to them, if they're engaged and they're looking at the image, they're looking at this guy, then they look at the light pole, the more time they spend on it, the more interesting it seems. If we'll take a look at some other images that aren't as interesting. But again, take a look at these sort of, and these are compositional rules, which means they can be broken and they're not always perfectly right. But, here's leading lines. So again, using perspective, drawing your eye up. Now, what works on this one is it's sort of it's a little bit underexposed, so you don't get a lot of detail here. You get the idea of an escalator or even a stairway. What I like is it's sort of this older person in silhouette heading into the clouds. I don't like that it's just this building. I wish that there were just clouds all the way across, and it would almost be like this elevator to heaven. It's like, oh, you're going off into heaven. Anybody see the movie Soul? My family made me watch that, and I don't usually watch Disney. It was interesting, but a little schmaltzy. But it reminds me of that elevator to heaven. Also, that person in there bothers me because now it's like, oh, they're coming back. So again, thinking about how those lines lead up, how they draw your eye up into that image. Again, kind of like that motorcycle image at the beginning, your eye goes to this guy. Actually, my eye kind of goes to her first because she's staring at the camera. My eye would go from her to him to her and then back over this way. Now they set it up, he's looking at her, she's not really looking at the baby, but it sets up movement. Now, Also, because of the angle of the camera, everything seems to be moving this way, which then brings you back over here. This guy actually takes you out of the frame. So he's kind of, if I were going to do anything, I'd get rid of him. And I'll show you how to do that in Photoshop at some point. But, you know, if it were just him, we'd be let off the frame and the image wouldn't be that interesting. It would take our eye out, not back into the image. Rule of odds, whenever there's just 2 people or 4 people, it's like bookends. You create a story about those 2 people. Now, again, if it's 2 people, it's a couple, how you lay them out in there, you know, can changes. But generally, like we like 1s, 3s, 5s, or 7s because they're more open-ended. They just allow us to think in sort of a different way. Symmetry, when everything is, you know, as if it were a mirror image, when you break that symmetry, so he becomes the focal point. One, you know, it's kind of a nice empty background. He's in silhouette, makes for sort of an interesting photograph.